In India, every 5 years we hear a debate about manufacturing and manufacturing exports. And mostly it is centered around have we done enough or are we doing anything and so on and so forth. But sometimes I guess we neglect on what we are really good at, which is services and services exports.
Yes, our services exports crossed $300 billion mark in 2022. We just surpassed Singapore, which exported a little under $300 billion. And now we are the seventh largest country in the world in terms of absolute services exports.
We will be discussing India's services exports, its past growth and future opportunities. Stay tuned. Let us have a look at the list of top 10 countries by the services exports in 2022. The US ranks first and is nearly $1 trillion. This is followed by UK, China, Germany, Ireland, and France. India ranks 7th and is followed by Singapore, Netherlands, and Spain.
Back in 2005, India's rank was 15th when we exported only $52 billion. Over these years, that is from 2005 to 2022, Germany, France, Netherlands, and Spain slipped by a few positions in the ranking, while India, China, Ireland, and Singapore gained significantly.
The growth rates during this period highlights why we see such a big change in the rankings. India is one of the fastest growing services exporting nation in the world. Of the top 10 countries by the services exports, Singapore's exports grew fastest, followed by Ireland and then India and China during the period from 2005 to 2022.
In the last 17 years, India has seen the third fastest growth in services exports globally, faster than US, faster than most developed countries and developing countries, and slightly faster than China. At 11% CAGR, India's services exports have grown 5 percentage points faster than the world average.
This trend was not only seen in the case of services exports but also goods exports. While globally, services exports have grown 70 basis points higher than the goods exports, in case of India, services exports have grown by almost 180 basis points. The point being that services exports for India have grown faster compared to both of our goods exports as well as the global services exports. India's share in world services exports has more than doubled in the last 17 years to 4.4% as of 2022 from 1.9% in 2005. And although the above discussion was with long term data, the recent trends are even more stark.
Yes, it seems that the world has not yet fully recovered from the COVID blow, at least from the services exports perspective. The global services exports growth is just 4% in the last 3 years compared to 6% since 2005. However, in the case of goods exports, we are seeing a 9% growth in the last 3 years compared to 5% since 2005.
But in both the case, that is exports growth from 2005 to 2022 and from 2019 to 2022, India's services as well as goods exports growth rates are strong.
What scenario can we see if we see a similar growth rate in the future?
Yeah, we can definitely do that. But let us make some conservative estimates for growth rates. In the last 10 years, that is from 2012 to 2022, India's services exports grew by 8% CAGR, while goods at only 4%. Using the same rates, we calculated that by 2033, India's services as well as goods exports will be around 700 billion US dollars. And that year can be important because, as per the calculations, our services exports in absolute terms will be higher than that of goods exports.
And currently, Ireland is the only country, excluding obviously the island nations and tax havens, where the services exports are higher than the goods exports. So, should this scenario get realized, India will be a unique country in that sense. But it is already unique.
And even after this 8% growth till 2033, India's services exports will be smaller than what the US services exports are today. And India's share in global services exports will be 6 to 7%. Of course, this is just a simplistic linear extrapolation. The reality will almost certainly be different. The government is trying very hard to encourage the manufacturing exports from India through schemes like the Make in India and the PLI. So, quite conceivably, goods exports from India will grow faster than what they have in the last decade. The larger point is that there is no fundamental reason to assume that our services exports cannot continue to grow.
Absolutely. We have seen how India has transformed from just being a call center hub to KPOs to the global IT hub within just a few decades. Now we are no longer seen as a low cost, semi skilled labor market. India is at the
Right.
forefront of providing high quality services to diverse set of clients. For example, foreign banks, graphic designers, tourism, and AI. We are progressing rapidly. And that's what our point is, that we should not neglect or undermine our strengths. And thus, corporates and governments should make more and more efforts in providing world class infrastructure and policy support to the service providers.
So, we have seen some data on how the services exports grew in the last decade, but what services do we really export? Without understanding that, this topic cannot end.
Yeah, if anybody needs a one line answer, then that is easy. Half of our services exports comprise of ICT services. ICT stands for Information Communication and Technology Services.
If we just glance how much of total services exports are ICT in different countries, then we stand out. Israel is the only nation ahead of us whose ICT services exports are 56% of total services exports. Rest of all the major countries are behind India.
Yeah, even in case of Israel, its total exports in 2022 are slightly above $90 billion, which is not even one third of total India's services exports. So we can definitely say that none of the major countries depend on ICT as much as we do.
Although this is true, we cannot ignore the risk of concentration.
True.
Travel and financial services exports, which are usually very high in other nations, their share in India's total services exports are around 3 to 4%.
That means our travel exports amount to around 9 to $10 billion annually.
And you know what? Disney's revenue from the theme parks admission fees in 2022 alone was close to $9 billion.
Wow.
So now you can imagine how small our travel exports are.
Yes, definitely. That only tells us that we should really diversify our service composition. Government programs like Gift City or Pravasi Bharat programs are aimed at increasing non ICT services exports, but I think we need to do much more than this.
More action on this front is needed, so we cannot neglect our strengths. Rather, we should play on our strengths.
Yeah.
That's what the modern trade aims at. So, on balance, we do believe we do a remarkable job on services exports. We should strive to become champions not just in the IT sector but also in other sectors as well.
Yeah. At least we should aim at earning what Disney earns in a year through admission fees in at least half year's time, at least in next 5 to 6 years. That should be our aim.
Right. So, what do you think India should aim at? We don't dismiss any efforts to boost manufacturing and goods exports, but we believe that our strong foothold in services can be leveraged in much better way.
Let us know if you agree with this or not.
And also tell us what new topics you want us to talk about.
If you are liking what we are doing, then share our videos with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.
Thank you.